everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some post-declutter kind of reflections. I kind of just want to chat through where my headspace is at after the pretty sizable purge that I did from my makeup collection a couple weeks back. If you haven't seen that video, I definitely recommend that you go and check it out, if not only just the intro and maybe the categories that interest you the most. But that way you can kind of see where my headspace was in the immediate moments of doing the declutter. But now that I've had a couple weeks to live with my now a little bit downsized collection and get to know my collection a little bit more, I really just wanted to take you through where my headspace is at now and just talk it out. This will more likely than not be a very chatty video. I have some kind of like loose notes, but I just wanted to sit down and talk them out. So this video is definitely inspired by a comment that was left on my declutter video. It was left by Sarah Littleton. I will leave the entirety of the comment here on the screen so that you can refer to all the questions that they had asked. However, basically in summary, the questions were referring to what are my long-term goals, or how does this declutter relate to my long-term goals with my makeup collection and my makeup usage, and what were my takeaways from doing the declutter. So this comment really made me think about this in a more high-level, bigger picture kind of context than how I had been looking at it in the immediate aftermath of the actual declutter itself. I think it's important to talk about where my headspace was even at before we did the declutter in order to work our way through to what the takeaways are and to kind of speak to everything in a little bit more of a whole kind of scenario. So leading up to the declutter, the desire was there for a long time. I felt like I needed to eliminate some things from my collection. And so I had been spending the last like 6 or 8 months, honestly, going through and using things that hadn't been reached for in a while, things that I had skipped over in previous declutters. They were just things that just lived in my collection and collected dust. And so I have been ensuring that I was reaching for those things, getting to know those things, and kind of doing my preemptive homework to determine if those were things that one day I may want to pan, or if they even were still good. Some of those things were years and years old. So I had been doing this kind of research in advance, and I started realizing that although I did come to conclusions on many of the products, there was a part of me that wasn't quite ready to part with them for one reason or another. And the main reason I was not ready to part with them was because they were too old to pass off to someone else. And also the thought of having that packaging go into the garbage was a big deal for me. I have been really hyper aware of what the beauty industry's waste is like, what the situation is like, and even just my own consumption, what that amount of waste looks like. But it took me some time to come to terms with the fact that that packaging is already garbage. Whether it's in my drawer and it contains makeup sitting in my drawer, it still is already garbage as it is. It just isn't yet in a landfill, or it isn't yet brought to a recycling facility, but it already is a piece of garbage. And in the last like 2 years, I've come to realize that. I did talk about that previously on my channel, but I haven't really allowed myself to apply the fact that I learned that and just accept that, okay, why sit on this garbage then? Why do that to yourself? They're formulas that I don't enjoy. These are things that I don't think I want to use up ever. Why would I keep them in my life then? They're already garbage. And yes, there was, some sort of financial obligation at one point or another, but at this point, it feels like a wash, especially things that have been in my collection for years on end. They do not owe me anything of the dollars that I spent on them. In fact, I have learned a lot about my preferences through having spent and wasted that money, whether it's sitting in my drawer unused or it already went in the trash. is indifferent. I finally came to accept that and to rationally understand that. And so I felt ready to part with some things that truly just were destined to be garbage regardless. I went into this declutter thinking if I don't want to use something and I don't enjoy using something, then why hold on to it any longer? And that's not to say that everything that I kept in this declutter is a tip-top favorite product, a love it kind of product, but they're products that I can foresee myself using and, enjoying enough to the fact that they do the trick. A bronzer that has a good tone and has a nice enough formula, I can use that up. And that does keep me from wanting to replace those products in my life because I do have something that fits the bill and I'd like to use those products up where and when it makes sense for me. I don't want to force myself to hate pan anything, but sometimes products are just okay, and I am totally cool with using things that are just okay. I don't have to be in love with every single thing that I use. I don't have to be. There can be things that just do their job all right enough, or I make them work all right enough. And so I went into this declutter really thinking about that. And I think that leads me into my overall collection goals and how this declutter applied to that and how it's working with my overall collection goals. One of my major goals that I have talked about several times as of late is that I really want to be able to rotate through my makeup collection. I want to find a balance between panning and just using things naturally. Whatever I feel like gravitating towards, I want to allow myself to do that. And so eliminating those things that I did not ever want to use allows me to simply rotate through my collection much more easily and effectively because I'm not weighed down by things that I don't want to use. Like, it's quite simple. I really want to feel as though the entirety of my collection is actually being used and rotated through. Although I might touch something only once or twice in a season or even in a year, I'd rather have that than have things that are just not being touched at all. I am so happy to say that ever since I did my declutter, I have used every single one of my foundations, every single one of my concealers and primers. I've just used them for the sake of using them, but also because I know that they work and I know that I like them. And that's something that I hadn't done for years. I had not been able to use each product in specific categories within a month span of time. And I'm not necessarily going to keep up that momentum moving forward, but it's nice to really feel like everything that I have in my drawer, I want to actually use. And I do think that with my collection as it stands right now and where it's at, I'm really looking forward to the prospect of using up pretty much every single item that I have in my collection. Now, I don't necessarily think that it is realistic to expect that I'm going to finish everything in its entirety, but the idea of using pretty much every product that I own doesn't feel daunting and doesn't feel like a horrible task if I look at each individual item. Because in reality, I still have much more makeup than is necessary and even possible to use for myself. But in theory, I feel like it would be a pleasure to use up pretty much everything that I own right now. And that feels so good. And the idea that I could enjoy project panning everything that I have, I think is an amazing byproduct to the fact that one of my also large scale collection goals as well is the idea that I want to purchase less and I just want to utilize what I have more. And through using what I already have on hand, yes, that thing is already garbage, but overall I will have less waste impact in the grand scheme of things than I would have if I continued on the same trajectory that I have been on for years of amassing, decluttering, amassing, and decluttering. And yes, decluttering produces garbage, but the things that I have now are going to keep me very satisfied to the point where I don't necessarily think I need to bring much more makeup into my collection to fill a void or to fill a gap or to fill that urge to try something new, because I am rotating through my collection and I'm trying things in new contexts. And that is just so refreshing for me to get to this point where having something new in my hands is not really what gives me the satisfaction when it comes to beauty, but using what I own is what gives me satisfaction when it comes to makeup. And I can create endless looks. I can create endless eye looks, endless lip looks. I can combine things. I can combine things in ways that I haven't in the past, and I can do that every day. I can play every single day and still feel joy with my makeup collection because they're things that do add value to my collection and do feel right for me. I purged 41 products from my life, and I don't feel like there are any gaps in my collection as it stands right now. I recently purchased 4 things from Cheekbone Beauty. It's a brand that I've been very curious about, and I was very selective with which products I did end up picking up, but it had been something that I was already thinking about in advance of the declutter, and I let myself sit on it for like far too long before deciding to do it and go for it. But yeah, I don't feel like I'm looking in my collection, I'm like, oh, now that I, decluttered 3 bronzers, I need 3 more bronzers back in my life, because the bronzers that I have are ones that I'm really excited to use. So that is a really satisfying feeling. And I think that I hadn't decluttered so strategically in the past, and I hadn't known what things were valuable to me and what things were not in previous declutters the way that I did with this one. And that just took that preemptive research for me to be able to go into it really understanding what should stay and what should go. However, I did end up bringing 2 items back into my life. So I technically did declutter only 39 products. In the weeks following my declutter, I went through and I was scraping the product out of all the packaging so that I can clean everything and properly recycle it, which is such a daunting task. That is when you really realize the extent of the waste of your makeup, because when you have to handle all that garbage again and again, it is a humbling experience. And believe me, I have a lot of makeup garbage living in my closet here because I just haven't properly recycled it. So I have a lot of makeup packaging that stares at me every day, and it's a good reminder that I don't want to bring in more. And that's a whole different issue. As I was scraping everything out so that I could clean the product packaging to properly recycle it in time, I realized that there are 2 products that I did end up wanting to keep, and dude, this one, I can't believe it, but I could not part with this. The thought of putting my spatula into here and scraping this product out just wasn't possible. The products that were not expired, they're things that I have given to people in my life already. I have ensured that they got rehomed. But the things that were expired, some of them, it felt so satisfying to scrape out the product. And then other things, it definitely was a little bit upsetting, but I knew it was time to eliminate those products from my collection. They were not serving me anymore. But this is something that I could not clean out, and I decided to put it back into my kind of everyday makeup drawer, and I've used it a handful of times, and I decided I am going to put it back. I'm going to reclutter this back into my life. This is the Makeup Geek and Kathleen Lights highlighter palette. And when I was doing my declutter, I rationalized that I didn't want to use up these 2 products, and I don't think that I'll ever want to use them up in their entirety, but I do feel like they are nice options to have when I look at now where my highlighter collection stands. I don't have anything like either of these, and more so this one. This is the one that I really had a hard time thinking about parting with. It is this kind of more bronzed tone, and last summer in my 30 by 30 project, I used this as a bronzer topper. And now that the days are longer, the sun is shining, you know, it's getting warmer outside. I was about to I was gonna scrape this into the garbage, and I went, no, your girl's gonna wanna wear this on her legs and shoulders. And so I decided to put it back into my collection and bring it back into my life. Feels silly to admit that, but yeah, if you do a declutter and you feel like you have to bring things back into your life and you're not ready to part with them, that is totally okay. But yeah, I'm keeping this one and then I will be keeping this as well. I had used this several times. This is the Dose of Colors Maybe Baby eyeliner, but in the moment of doing the declutter, I had a user error, so I just will admit that. I thought that the retractable pencil stopped working because I was spinning this section right here, but in fact, this is actually just a detachable sharpener for the product, and it retracts with the component up on the top here. So the fact that I can still use it, I decided to pull it back into my collection because there's absolutely nothing wrong with this product. We know I love greens. This is the shade Maybe Baby. I'm not sure that I even said that, but we know I love greens, so yeah, I'm keeping it. It was just a total oversight on my part, thinking that it was no longer working. And I have kind of spoken about these things here and there throughout this video already, but one of the key things that Sarah had asked in the question was also, what are my takeaways? And so I want to talk about those as well. These are things that I maybe have thought about already in the past, but this declutter really did drive that message home. It reiterated that for me. The first thing for sure that I take away from this declutter and declutters in the past, project panning as a whole, is that when I get to task myself with the idea of using what I already have, it prevents me from the idea of wanting to purchase more, because I'm so fixated on using what already exists in my life and rotating through what I already have in my life and getting a sense of what all of those things are and how they can be implemented into my routine, that the urge to bring something new in and to fit it into that routine is almost a little bit overwhelming for me at times. And it's so funny to say that now, because there used to be this part of me that really wanted to have the new so that I could review, and that was not meant to rhyme, but there was a part of me that did want that. But the very thought of having to try to formulate my thoughts and opinions on new things while really tasking myself with the goal of rotating through what I have is actually very overwhelming and very stressful for me. And so that is in part why I did decide to really minimize the amount of PR that comes into my life this year, is because of that very reason. I want to use what I already have, and I don't want to feel an obligation to get to know something else outside of what I already own. This sounds so silly, but it's true. And then one of my other major takeaways is that I don't want to have to do a declutter of this size again. I don't have any interest in wanting to purge over 40 items from my life at once. I never want to do that again, actually. I would like to use up a majority of what I can, and then I'd like to really just declutter as I realize that things no longer work for me, things maybe are expired, but really I don't want to ever sit down and just watch myself throw away a mass of makeup products ever again. That just does not sound appealing to me whatsoever. So I want to be very calculated with what comes into my life, very thoughtful about what comes into my life, and bring in smaller amounts of products so that I can really get to know those fewer items, and hopefully not just bring in so much that I have to do a large declutter like this. And that just feels like such a big sigh of relief, the idea that I'm never gonna do a declutter like that. And I know that people love seeing declutters on YouTube. I know that they do get the views, but I'm not going to be doing declutters of that size ever again. It's just not going to happen for me because my collection is not going to require such a sizable declutter. And my final takeaway from this declutter was just how eye-opening it really is to see the garbage created by myself as a beauty consumer. And yeah, that's something that I have known for a while, but when you see all 40 plus products together as a pile of now no longer coveted, no longer curated and held within a drawer, when you see it as a pile that you know is inevitably going to go into likely a landfill, but hopefully into some sort of recycling facility, it really hits different when you're trying your best to really be more cognizant of that, and you're way more aware of that than you ever were in the past. Like, I never used to think that a single blush compact, who cares that it's going in the garbage? But when I realized that through my declutter, several of the products that I had, they had to go into the garbage because they were no longer usable. And the thought of doing that frequently, like doing a large declutter to that extent ever again, is just daunting. It's just daunting, and it's not something that I have any interest in doing whatsoever because I don't want to see that a mass of garbage ever again. So it really just solidified for me how I want to be as a consumer, and that is using what is already in my possession. I guess saying that, I know that I'm in a fortunate type of position because I already have a lot of makeup. The collection that I do have will eventually be downsized, and that will happen through project panning and through using things up, but I don't want to hyper focus on using up only a select few number of products and allow the other things to expire while those are getting used up. So I need to, again, find that balance between using what I have up to completion and just getting use out of what I already have as well. And I feel like I've struck a very good balance by reducing the number of project pans that I'm working on this year, because I don't feel so overwhelmed about trying to hit goals, but I'm really just allowing myself to use this collection in whatever way fits my desires for that day, that month, that season. And that is something that I'm very grateful for. I'm very grateful that I've gotten to this point after 5 years of project panning that I don't feel like I want to bring new into my life when I'm not project panning. Because I think when I first started my project panning journey, I probably would have purchased a lot more if I wasn't focused on panning. But now I've reduced the amount of panning that I'm doing, and I still feel like I don't need to bring in more because I really struck this interesting balance, and honestly a massive mindset change as well that I just hadn't had in years past because I wasn't so cognizant of what the waste looked like. I also was mentally probably not in my best headspace for the years leading up to what brought me to wanting to project pan, because I wanted to just always have that immediate satisfaction of something new. And now I get so much more satisfaction out of using my collection as it is. And that is something that I'm very grateful for, that shift. But I understand and I recognize that that is not where everyone is at. So I'm not trying to say this as something that I'm bragging or whatever. And I don't think that my core audience would see it that way. I'm just trying to speak to where I'm at now and who I am now. But if you want to purchase makeup while panning, you want to do a declutter and bring new makeup into your collection, you do you. I'm not judging you for that whatsoever. Just today, we're just talking about my goals, where I'm at, and where my headspace is at. I am just rambling at this point. I hope that today's video was something of interest to you. I really hope that today's chat was something that maybe did spark a little bit of a shift in your mindset, even just for the moment, and maybe makes you think about what happens after you do your next declutter, or once you finish up a makeup product from your collection. Makes you just think about the consumer that you want to be in the future. But yeah, that is everything for today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed watching. I really just want to say a huge thank you to you for spending time with me, hanging out with me. But yeah, that's everything. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.